You're listening to the Miracles in Meat podcast. I'm Shane Thibodeau, a fourth-generation butcher at one of the oldest meat markets in the world. My great-grandfather started this business by slaughtering one cow or pig at a time and selling the cuts door-to-door on horse and buggy. Today, our products are enjoyed across the globe. I will attempt to give you some insight as to how we got here and explore the challenges we've had along the way. At Bourgeois, our mission is to preserve our heritage generation after generation through legendary Cajun flavors and the development of relationships, not customers. Since 1891, Bourgeois has maintained age-old culinary traditions that fuel the South Louisiana lifestyle. Over the past 133 years, our Cajun products have gained global recognition, and for tens of thousands of folks around the world, the Bourgeois Cajun Lady logo is a symbol of home. Today, the fourth-generation butchers sit at the 9-foot maple block with loyal customers to discuss the adventures, skills, and passions that guide each of their legacies. These conversations will become priceless resources for future generations of any industry. This is our way of maintaining the spirit, purpose, and traditions of our lost arts in a world of change. 133 years, 4 generations. We're just getting started. All right, next up we got some questions. If you go to our website, bourgeoismeatmarket.com, you click on Miracles in Meat podcast at the top. That's the page that has all of our podcast episodes. Keep scrolling. You're going to see a form that says submit a question to the podcast. You can submit a question, comment, concern, feedback, something like that. You can even upload an audio file and do a little something like that. We'll either read it or we'll play it on a future episode. So if you didn't know that was there, go check it out. Send us something. We'd love to get these questions because a lot of the questions we take for granted, and we think everyone knows the answers to them. But I guess it's obvious that we don't do a good job pushing our info out there. So this is a little bit for fun and a little bit to help people out. So send them in. All right, here's a question from Facebook. Are y'all open today? Let's see. This was on March 4th. When was that? Looks like that was a Tuesday. Okay, that was Mardi Gras Day. So, no, man, we were actually closed that day. I appreciate the question, and I hope we get many more in. These are really fun. All right, Bart Folse is the owner of Folse Alarm Fire Co. They make some hot sauce, some really good hot sauce, and we actually sell a couple of their products. You can find the bottles on the shelves over at our new store in Gray. This conversation was really special. It turned out to be much more than I could have hoped for. This is actually my first time meeting Bart, so all the questions were genuine, and I was really just curious about how he got started and what's going on and what the hot sauce business is like. I learned a lot about him. Also learned a lot about us because Bart has a really cool perspective of our place, and he was able to put that into words in a way that really hit home for me. So I absolutely get choked up a couple times, maybe near the end, just because of the way he explained the way he saw this place and how it makes him feel to walk in this building. And we take that stuff for granted because we're here every day, and we forget what it looks like from an outsider or from a long-time customer. So really appreciate this, Bart, and thanks for coming in. Hopefully we can get lots of more local business owners and just interesting people here to do the same, have the same types of conversations. All right, let's do it. Got Bart Folse here today with Folse Alarm Fire Company. Bart, why don't you give us a little background on your story, and then we'll kind of get into some of the business side of things and all right, and hot sauce.
Well, look, I can give you I'll give you the short version of my story because I don't know if we have enough time to tell the long story. But I'm born and raised in Vacherie. Went to high school at E.D. White, so went to E.D. White and then walked down the street and went to Nichols for undergrad. Studied athletic training while I was there, and then kind of started a job in healthcare, found my way into healthcare administration, have been there for most of my career, and got my MBA again from Nichols in 2016. And in 2021 founded Folse Alarm Fire Company after just a lifelong passion for cooking and Louisiana cuisine and Louisiana culture. My grandpa Potch, he instilled just this love of cooking in me. Goes back to all the times that we spent at the camp together. Sitting around the big pot, sitting around the fire, just having something going. And it's been a passion project for me. So what started out as a hobby in 2021 has turned into a real viable business for me that's now looking like it could become a full-time job here in the near future.
That's exciting, man. What year was it again? You started?
21.
In 21. What'd your grandpa do?
He was a jack of all trades. He was a welder and a ship fitter. He worked at Avondale Shipyard for over 50 years. But he was also, his father, my great grandpa, he was a fisherman and a trapper only. So my grandpa picked up that way of life, and I heard stories about him, like, going in the morning to cut bait, and then he would run the van around Vacherie to pick up all the guys that worked at Avondale, and they'd go and work a full shift at Avondale. Then he'd get back, and he'd go and like check his traps in the evenings, and man was always working. He had what he called a little garden, but it was probably a 12-acre garden that he tilled everything by hand. He picked everything by hand.
Little tiny garden.
Yeah, a little tiny garden. And I can remember a lot of afternoons and weekends, me being with him in that tiny little garden, digging potatoes or picking tomatoes or whatever else was in season. And just building that relationship, getting to love the outdoors, getting to love kind of knowing where my food came from and how to craft it all together, whether it was, the tomatoes that were in season or, cucumbers, and learn how to pickle those, and or militons, and, of course the fish and anything we kill when we were on hunting trips or whenever we were trapping. But it was, it was a great childhood for me with him.
Where'd y'all do all your hunting and fishing? Mostly Vacherie?
Yeah, most of the fishing we did was around Lake des Allemands, like in the bayous there. We crossed the lake and go to Lake Buff pretty regular. And deer hunting, we did mostly deer hunting growing up, and we were in this hunting club up in this little town called Pine Grove. It's up kind of between, I would say, Denham Springs and Amite along Highway 16. My dad's still in that club. My uncles are all still in that club, and I still go a few times a year and hunt with them. And that's where we did most of our deer hunting. Actually didn't start doing much other hunting, other than rabbits and squirrels like everybody else in and around the area. Didn't do much duck hunting until probably I was in high school and then college, and then I've continued that somewhat as an adult. But kind of hunted all across Southeast Louisiana doing most of that.
You teach you how to cook?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. What do you remember him cooking?
He was known best for his jambalayas, and he, in fact, on his tombstone is an engraving with a jambalaya pot that says like Jambalaya King, and that was the one thing I can remember most vividly cooking with him.
Jambalaya, yeah.
So,
outside, or would he cook inside?
Oh, it was all outside.
All outside.
And he'd have these giant cast iron pots that we're all familiar with, these 30, 40 gallon pots. And he never measured anything. Mm-hmm. He would fill his pot with the hose, and he knew he had done it so many times. He knew exactly where the line of that water needed to be in the pot for how much rice he had. He never measured anything out. And man, it was such a feel about it with him. And it was so cool. But I mean, I can remember, like, I'm cooking a jambalaya this weekend actually, and I can remember, like, as soon as I strike up that pot, as soon as I start browning down the meat, I can smell all these familiar smells. And like when you get to that point where you can sort of smell the rice toasting, like before it really like boils up and fluffs up, like you can almost smell like this toastiness of the rice. That's such a like familiar scent. Like it takes me back to my childhood, like immediately.
That's so cool, man. Speaking of like not using recipes, I think that's gonna be lost.
Yeah.
I really think that's a method of cooking that's gonna just wither away because they're just so rigid. Everyone's so rigid. They need like direction. They need something. And I think it's fine to get started, and maybe that's how you should get started if you don't have someone like in your family hands-on showing you how to cook. But I think I would suggest to everyone to just try some stuff. Like, forget some of the stuff in the recipe or leave it out on purpose in case one day you got to cook and you don't have it. And now you think you can't cook it because you don't have this one thing.
Right.
You know?
Or even better, swap it out for something else.
Yeah.
If it calls for crawfish, try shrimp or try crab or hell, throw some smoked meat in there. Like, just try something different to see how flavors work together. That's one of the things I love the most about cooking in particular is you can try something and pretty quickly you know if the result is good or bad. And if it's good, then great. You can try that again. You can modify it again. And if it's bad, there's very little loss. Like you lose a few bucks from what you put in the pot, but otherwise it's it's a valuable learning experience.
I think that's why everyone around here we're just known for having good cooks around here, because I think a lot of people learn at the camp with Papa or with Dad or with the uncle, and you just make do with what you got. And if all you have is one onion and a damn stick of butter, like, you're gonna do something with it.
Man, that reminds me. I can remember when I was a kid. There was a couple times when we'd be at the camp, and a lot of times when I was younger, I'd stay in with Papa, and we would start cooking while a lot of guys were out hunting, particularly when it was real cold. And I can remember he would get me started. I was probably no older than 6 or 8 years old. He'd get me started chopping onions. And I'd ask me, "Pa, what are we cooking that night?" He's like, "I don't know, but it starts with onions."
That's it. That's the way to learn. I think that's the way to learn. All right, let's get into a little bit of the hot sauce business.
Yeah, man.
Dude, first, I guess I don't know anything about it. So give me some history of hot sauce if you got anything like that.
So, I don't think it's a stretch to say that, the history of hot sauce begins with Louisiana. At least any relevant hot sauce. Hot sauce has been around for thousands of years, as is most of cuisine and most of the influences of Louisiana cuisine. But when you think about kind of a modern hot sauce, you think about the hot sauces that are on the table at every restaurant around the world. You think of Louisiana style hot sauces. Tabasco deserves a lot of credit. They were the ones who really figured out and got it started. Commercially getting hot sauce out to the masses. Then there's been some other brands out there who have done a phenomenal job. Crystal, Louisiana, Bruce Foods, and some of those guys, kind of all clustered around that Acadiana mix. So rich hot sauce history here throughout the state, and it's sort of ingrained here in the culture, and it's one of those foods that not so much I've found in like Cajun households. When you think Cajun food, if I were to ask you, like, what's one of the ingredients that's quintessentially Cajun, like, you don't necessarily think hot sauce first. But if I asked anybody from outside of this region what makes Cajun food, they're immediately going to hot sauce. They're going to cayenne pepper. They're going to something that represents the spice and the that bold kind of pungent flavor. And so hot sauce has always been a little intriguing to me as a condiment, even though, like, truthfully, in my house before I started making hot sauce, I didn't use a whole lot of hot sauce.
Yeah. What kind did you grow up on?
I grew up on Louisiana or Crystal.
Yeah. I was always stuck on Louisiana, I guess. Yeah. Papa?
Yeah.
Same?
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Okay, so what about in our area? Is there any kind of history in our local area?
Not really. I mean, there's the history that I can recall, and from best that I can tell, is there's a lot of local folks who would grow either cayenne peppers or Tabasco peppers, or even those little ornamental peppers, and they'd make piment vinaigre, so they'd make pepper vinegar with it, and that was sort of their substitute for what we consider hot sauce. Most people think of hot sauce as like, oh, I'm just going to top a dish with this to add a little spice and a little vinegar. Well, I think all these kind of local cooks, like that's what they use. Like that's what I can remember from my childhood growing up, and from, the best of my ability trying to dig it all up. That's the best that I can tell that this region does and does well. And that's kind of all across the state, but that's the one thing that seems predominantly in the river parishes and in the Bayou region is this Piedmont vinaigre, but not a lot of real hot sauce presence.
Anywhere further out of state? Where's Tabasco at?
On Avery Island, so right outside of
Have you been there?
Yeah.
Yeah, you went through the tours and everything.
Yeah,
I have never.
Yo, you should. It's a cool spot to go just to see that production and how much sauce they're actually putting out. Just to put in perspective of scale. In a good weekend, I can make about 2,000 bottles of sauce, which sounds like a lot of hot sauce. They're running about 2 million bottles a day on their production.
God, that's wild. I would not have guessed that.
Yeah, so you should go check them out. It's worth the trip. They recently, like last few years, they redid it, and they now have a cool restaurant on site, and which my buddy Nelson Booty, he runs there. But there's a cool walking tour. You can kind of see the whole island.
Did you go? Have you been since you started your business?
Yeah, I went back last year, I believe. Yeah.
Cool.
Well, 23. So I went back in 23.
Did you learn anything while you were there, as far as like stuff you can implement at, in your operation?
So I lived in New Iberia for 7 or 8 years, and so I got to be very familiar with Tabasco. This was all before I started my business, and little did I know at the time, but all of these things turned out to like influence me, and learning about making a pepper mash, learning about what aging and fermenting those peppers do to create complexity in a particular flavor. That all influenced me, and it kind of stuck in the back of my mind. So when I decided to do this little experiment of like making my first batch of sauce, I knew that I wanted to go that route. I didn't want to just blend up some peppers with some vinegar and call it hot sauce. I wanted to ferment my peppers. I wanted to ferment my mash and figure out if I could do it on my own and create these like complex flavors that you just can't get blending vinegar and peppers.
So it's an old process that you're using.
Yep.
Okay. Did you get to see any of that at Tabasco, or is...
Yeah, I was lucky enough in a couple of the jobs that I had. I got a few like behind the scenes tours at Tabasco, and really was able to see what they do on a whole different level. Being able to actually get up close and personal with some of the barrels and see how they're barrel fermenting all of these peppers. So they say that they're just aged, but the reality is that they're fermenting in those barrels, and that's what's creating the complexity of flavor. Seeing how they're getting their peppers and turning them into a puree and then mixing them with the salt to get the proper fermentation. And a lot of what Tabasco is doing, I found out later, is something that's sort of they've imitated that Asians have been doing for centuries. In these clay pots, they would ferment peppers, or they ferment a lot of different vegetables in these clay pots, and it would turn them into these wonderful sauces. I mean, that's how soy sauce is made. That's how most of fish sauce, oyster sauce, like all of these things that you see in Asian cooking, they all follow a pretty similar method where it puts a vegetable or puts some sort of item into a clay pot with salt or a salt brine, and it ferments, and over time it turns into this complex sauce. And Tabasco imitated that and put it in. What they did differently was they put it into wood barrels and let it age in wood barrels instead of in clay pots. And that wood ingrains a lot of flavor into the peppers as well.
Gotcha.
And over time, you get this really complex sauce.
Have you tried that?
The mash?
Wood barrels.
I haven't tried wood barrels yet. I did one small batch. Yeah, dude. Yeah, I want to talk to Noah over at Bayou Terrebonne and see if I can get a used barrel.
Now you're talking.
I did one small batch with like a 1 gallon barrel one time, and it was by far my favorite sauce that I've made.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's something to chase, I guess.
Yeah.
Okay, how do you make hot sauce?
So it's actually a fairly simple process.
If I grow a little pepper in my yard, what to start with? What kind?
So it really doesn't matter what kind of peppers you start with. Anything that has, even you could do it with bell peppers if you want to. You're just not going to have any heat.
Okay.
But it's actually pretty simple. You take your peppers, your whole peppers, or in my case, like I'd like to kind of put them in a food processor and chop them up real good so that you can fit more in any given space. Then you cover those either in pure salt, based on it's like 3% salt per weight of peppers that you have, or the easier way, and the way that I got started was with a saltwater brine. So you create a 2.5 to 3% saltwater brine, and you immerse everything in there. And then just like you were making homemade wine, you would top it and then have a little airlock so that nothing can get in, and you just let it ferment for like 7 to 10 days. And you'll see it's going to kind of get cloudy, and most of the peppers and stuff are going to sink to the bottom. And that's when you know like it's fully fermented. From there, there's some guys who just blend that whole, they blend that whole mash liquid and everything all into their sauce, and like that becomes their sauce. I don't do that. It does impart a particular flavor. It's a little bit too funky for my taste and for what I'm going for. So generally what I'll do is I leave the brine out. I blend my peppers into a fine paste, and then I'll add some vinegar back to it, and that's pretty much the process.
No, like filtration.
Not you can
Stuff like that.
You can, but I tend not to. I've gotten to the point now where it started kind of early. I used a food mill. Really early on, I was using a hand food mill, and I was grinding everything down because, as you imagine, you get a pretty thick paste from blending up all these pepper parts and their seeds and whatnot. And all the food mill really did was it took the seeds out of what I was doing, but everything else got grinded into this like really fine paste. So when you cut it with vinegar, it turns into kind of a liquidy consistency. There are some hot sauce manufacturers out there that really kind of fine filter their stuff, and they keep all of the particulate out. I don't like doing that. I like keeping some of the skin. I like keeping the pulp of the pepper in there because that's what imparts the flavor of the pepper more so than just the heat. And you can even, sriracha is a good example, but there's just blended up seeds in there. So you can, you can just blend it real fine, or the finest you can, and turn it into a pretty good hot sauce.
Can you taste the hot sauce and tell what kind of pepper it comes from? Or are most people using like blends of different peppers, I guess?
Most people are using blends, but yeah, I think you can. If you at this point, I'm far from a master or a pepper sommelier, but I've gotten pretty good at knowing what the flavor profile of each pepper is and knowing how to pair it.
How many different peppers are you working with?
So me, it's primarily 3 in most of my sauces. For my Louisiana style sauces, I use cayenne and red jalapeno. So that's for paches and the pope. I use cayenne and red jalapeno. The reason being, like, I like the heat level on both of those. I love the color, and the flavor of those peppers is, to me, the most distinctly sort of Louisiana. There's a lot greater sort of like, and it's strange to say this, there's a more fruity element to a red jalapeno than there is to just cayenne, or than there is even to a Tabasco pepper. And that additional fruity element, actually, it does something to complement the rest of the sauce or cause it to be a little more complex. And then in my other sauces, so in my Grand Isle, which is mango, pineapple, habanero, and then cherry bounce, I use habaneros. I use red habaneros in there. And the reason I use habaneros is just that. It's that fruitiness. Most people don't think of peppers having any flavor other than just heat. But habaneros, and really, really well done habaneros, have a really distinct sort of sweet fruitiness to them. And if you can get past the heat, you can really enjoy the fruit of that. And I think, mango and pineapple is kind of a classic combination with habanero because it's along sort of that same flavor profile. The cherry bounce is one that is It's my most sort of bizarre sauce, but it's also grown to be quickly like one of my favorite sauces and one of my best sellers. It's cherry, balsamic vinegar, honey, and habanero, and all of those flavors work really well together to give you something that's sweet and tangy and spicy and complex and a little bit tart, and it just works.
I just tasted. Bart brought me a little gift box with. He's got the Grand Isle, he's got the Patches, the Shines, seasoning, the Pope, and Cherry Bounce. And I just took a little lick of the Grand Isle. It's got the pineapple mango and orange habanero. Mm-hmm. I'm thinking tacos with red snapper.
Yep. Man,
it's great.
I love that
sauce.
I love that sauce with
My wife
fish.
would like this. Shrimp.
Yeah.
I could see that all over some shrimp.
Yep. So there's I did send a few boxes as part of my marketing campaign. I sent a few boxes to a few influencers, and there's one guy, emails Cajun Kitchen, if you're following him on the socials. He did a baked redfish on the half shell, and he topped it with that. And the recipe got a lot of traction. Actually did a lot of good for me in my business. I think I sold out a Grand Isle the day that he posted that video.
Awesome. That's the one he used, the Grand Isle?
Yeah.
He did that on the redfish?
Yep.
Cool. All right, I got a couple questions.
Sure.
We went over how to make it. This is actually the first question I wrote down. When I'm cooking a pot of something and I do want to put some hot sauce in it, when do I put it?
I think it depends on what effect you're going for. If you want the heat and the complexity of flavor to really be pronounced, I would say add it early. Give it a chance to get in there, intermingle with all the other flavors. It's why I like using either Patches or the Pope. I like using either of those for marinades. Or like if I'm going to throw some meat on a smoker, just give it a light little mix in with your binder. Mm-hmm. It works really well because a lot of the tartness from the vinegar sort of cooks out over time, so you're just left with this like complex fermented pepper flavor.
Just like a deeper flavor.
Yep.
I was always curious about that. And I don't know. That's something I do think about every time I grab some, and I don't often cook with it, but whenever I do, every time I go, should I put this in earlier or should I wait till a little later? Yeah,
if you feel like the dish needs a little more acid, where you feel like it's a little too rich and you want to add something to cut through the richness, hot sauce is a great solution for that because it's both acidic and it's spicy. So
right
both
at the
of
end.
Those, right at the end.
Yeah. Are you a put it in the pot guy or a put it on the bowl?
I'm mostly a put it on the bowl guy. Okay. But I will, like I've already alluded to, I will season my proteins with it before it goes in the pot.
So, all right. You're cooking gumbo at your house, and you invite me. You're putting it in the pot?
I am seasoning my chicken with hot sauce.
Which one?
I probably go with Patches because I do a little less garlic in my gumbos, but I'll go with Patches to season my chicken. But once the chicken's in the pot, I'm not adding a whole lot of hot sauce, if any, to that. I like to let the flavors of what's already on the chicken or in the pot kind of flavor the dish, and then I'll have the bottle of Patches at the table for you to top it off with.
No trouble like burning in the searing process or anything like that?
No.
That's I've always been curious about that too. What you putting in a fish fry right there?
I like putting the Pope in a fish fry.
Pope's a little more garlicky.
It's a little more garlicky, so it's something a little different than what you'll find in Louisiana or Tabasco or of the like. Definitely has a lot more garlic content than the rest of them. So it's a nice different little twist on it. But I lean for the Pope on that. The Pope's my best seller. People love it.
Yeah. Was that the first one you made?
No, Patches was the first one. And once I mastered the recipe for Patches, I decided, or I got so many requests, mostly from my dad bugging me, to make a garlic hot sauce that I made one that I swear I thought I was making it so overly garlicky that that nobody was going to like it, just because I was trying to shut my dad up, and everybody loved it. Basically what I did was I took one batch of paches and I dumped 30 pounds of roasted garlic into it and blended it all together, and people fell in love with it. So
That's great. And then what about the cherry bounce? Was that going on?
So cherry bounce is one that, before I ever started making hot sauce, I would make this pepper jelly, like habanero pepper jelly and balsamic vinegar glaze. Anytime I grilled pork chops, that was my go-to sauce for it. And as soon as I started making sauce, I was like, I got to figure out how to recreate this and put it into a bottle. And cherry bounce is what I came up with. It originally started with ghost peppers, because I got some ghost peppers from a friend and wanted to try to make something, and I was like, the sweetness of the honey and the cherry, that'll kind of balance it out, but it was still a little too hot for most people. So then I found these it's a red Savina habanero is what I use, and the red Savina it's a particular strain of habanero that was actually bred to make the ghost pepper, but it's very, very fruity. So I wanted to try those, and it's about half the heat of a ghost pepper. Blended it all in, using a lot of the same flavor profiles. And man, I have fallen in love with this sauce since day one. It's shockingly versatile. Like I wouldn't top your white beans with it. I wouldn't top your gumbo with it, but it works great with grilled meats. It works great. People love it with like charcuterie boards. They love it with like the old cream cheese presentation and just pouring some of that on top with some wheat thins or something.
Cool.
I've used it as salad dressing. It works in a lot of different ways. It's a solid sauce. It's probably the one I'm most proud of, I should say.
Awesome. And okay, so you kind of answered my question. You said your dad kind of demanded one of the flavors.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that? I'm assuming you came out with Paches and then the Pope right after.
Yeah.
So you came out with 1, 2, and then I'm sure you got buddies or family members, and everyone has an idea for you, and they say you need to do this. How do you handle that?
Yeah, it's a delicate balancing act, but I will give my friends and family a lot of credit, because they're all good cooks in their own right. So when they make a suggestion, it's one that at least lands with me. I don't know if I take them all to heart, but I at least like listen to them for a second and try to see if there's any merit to what they're suggesting. And they've all got ideas, but most often what it is, it's like they'll try something. They're at a restaurant and they'll try a particular sauce, and they say, man, I just had this amazing thing. Like, what do you think about making something like this? And then my brain kind of noodles on it for a little while. And sometimes I figure out, like, I can't do that, like, for whatever reason. Or at least it's not worth the hassle to do it right now. But more often than not, like, after a little while of noodling on it, I'm like, you know what? Like, maybe I can't do this, but let me tweak those. Like, that flavor profile is interesting, or I think it would be interesting. Let me try something else that's kind of in this ballpark, and that's what I come up with.
Is your wife the end-all, be-all taste tester before you say this is it?
She never tastes anything.
No? Oh, no.
No, I think she's afraid to be the guinea pig. Once it's in the bottle and it's gotten the seal of approval, she's all in, but she doesn't taste test anything for me. I have this great group of neighbors, our whole neighborhood. We get together all the time, and all my buddies there, I trust their opinion when it comes to food.
You got a board.
Yeah, so I have a board.
I think that's important.
Yeah, and for a while there, they were the ones who were just eating all the raw peppers that I was having mailed to me, because early on I couldn't get peppers. So
where do you get your peppers?
So there's a farm out of Florida now that I get everything from, because it takes such a large quantity of peppers that none of the local farms grow enough peppers to be able to support it. For instance, it takes about 40 pounds of cayenne peppers to make 5 gallons of sauce, or 5 gallons of ferment, which will yield about 2.5 to 3 gallons of sauce from that ferment. So it just becomes so much, because if you ever picked up a cayenne pepper, it weighs nothing. So if you think about what 40 pounds looks like, it's a huge box. But there's some specific forms in Florida that all they specialize in is peppers, and I get them sent to me from there, and the rest we handle.
Are you constantly trying new peppers, or like thinking about new peppers, or are you going to stick with your 3 that you like?
So I'm always open to trying new things. When I first started out, it was kind of out of necessity. So the business started very, very quickly and very, very organically. It started with my dad and his friends. My dad grew some pepper plants with the intent of just making some pepper vinegar, and I made.
And what you call it?
Piment vinaigre.
Piment vinaigre.
And I made enough of that for me and my dad and for everybody else, and then we had peppers left over. So I just said, you know what? Like, in the spirit of experimentation, let me try to make hot sauce. I've never tried before. Papa never made hot sauce, but hell, like kind of what we were talking about with food, it's a pretty easy thing, and it's a low risk thing. If it's terrible, then so be it. Well, the first batch was great, and I brought it to my dad and his friends, who have this sort of old man's cooking club that they get together seemingly every night and they cook. So they tested it and they loved it. So I kept making hot sauce, and then they started bringing me peppers from their garden, and then peppers started showing up on my doorstep with notes in them that said, try making some hot sauce. And then before long, within 6 weeks, I had filed the LLC paperwork, I had launched a website, and I was turning this thing into a business, but I had not figured out where I'm going to get peppers from.
And you didn't tell your wife yet.
Yeah, I didn't tell my wife. I had no idea where I was going to get peppers from, so I started sourcing them from any place I could find them on the internet, and I was getting a whole mixed bag of different things. And that's when I did the most of my experimenting, was really early on. I tried super hot peppers to see what I can make, reapers and scorpions and everything else. I tried some really weird peppers that are kind of rare and that, no one really commercially produces to any great degree. Came up with some really great sauces. That's kind of how all of these sort of, spun out eventually. But there's a couple of sauces that I'm still trying to figure out how to produce them at a large enough scale where it's worth my time, because they're really solid sauces. It's just a matter of like getting them to be at the production capacity that I am now versus making 25 bottles at a time in my kitchen.
Another question. Is there a perfect ripeness for the pepper, or does this fermenting process kind of make that not matter?
So that's sort of a two-part question. The ripeness definitely matters, but the perfect ripeness depends on what you're trying to get out of the pepper.
So it's not a pick it at this time no matter what you're going to use it for. Gotcha. Yeah, that's interesting.
So, for instance, red jalapeno is a good example. Like, I use red jalapenos not just for their color, because their color is beautiful, but it's the color and the flavor profile. Because when they're green, I mean, we've all had a green jalapeno that's not pickled. It's very green. It tastes like a vegetable.
Tastes green. That's perfect.
It tastes green. It's like biting a stalk of spicy celery, basically. But over time, as it ages and as it gets a dark red ripeness, it actually turns less. It takes a little less of the green form, and it tastes more like a sweet bell pepper that also has some spice to it. So it makes for a nice, more full flavor profile for a sauce like this. Because if it was too green, it would take over that entire.
Any of these have one pepper in them?
Both Grand Isle and Cherry Bounce only have one pepper. There's just the habanero.
So the first one you made, you put all three of your favorites in there?
I don't have habanero in Patches or the Pope.
Are people like allergic to just one type of pepper?
Some people say they are, but I think those people are a little bit nuts. Not to discount anybody who might be listening who is really allergic, but
when I eat jalapenos, my tongue gets really hot.
Yeah, but habaneros are okay. I've heard it all, but in reality, most peppers are from one of two different like genetic class, and I can't remember. of course, because I'm trying to think about it right now, but it's the capsaicin family, which cayenne, jalapeno, habanero, all of these kind of fall into the same technical genetic species. They're all just different iterations of this species. Kind of like the way dogs represent, even though they're all the same species, they represent in 1,000 different ways. Peppers are the same way. So you shouldn't be allergic to one and not all of the others. Of course, I'm not a physician, and and I shouldn't be speaking on people's specific allergies, but they shouldn't be allergic.
How often you getting this stuff in your eyes?
Less often than one would think, but more often than I would like.
So I was in the Marine Corps, and I went through school for embassy security, and we had to get OC spray. And funny story. So it's terrible. It's the worst thing ever. If a cop ever threatened me with a can of it, I would do whatever he said, no matter what, whenever. No questions. But the guys, so they run this little program. They say, hey, if you have your paper or your form, your certificate saying you've already gotten it, like you've already gotten level 1, then we'll do level 2 on you, which is not as bad. It's not directly in your eyes. They put it on a towel and they wipe your face with it instead. So they asked, raise your hand if you already got it and you got your certificate. So the line of people go up there and they let them go first. Well, they take the towel, which is like a terry cloth towel like this, and they spray it on, and they like grab their face and they just scraped it across their skin to where now they just did a big brush burn across their eyes. And a couple people got out of that line because they're like, wow. I'll just take the spray again. So yeah, imagine you do it in your house?
Not anymore. I don't. I have an actual space that I have dedicated to this.
I was going to ask, how does it leave the atmosphere
there's a reason I have a dedicated space for it now. That was one of the things where my wife just like drew the line. She was like, we cannot do this anymore.
Do you need like vent hoods?
Oh yeah. My favorite story about this is I was preparing, this was back in August. I was preparing for the Louisiana Restaurant Association show, which is huge show, a bunch of industry folks there. I was trying to prepare to get as much sauce as I could prepared for that show. And I was working late one evening in the shop trying to bottle some sauce. And, I'm stirring in my kettles, just trying to get it up to temp for pasteurization. And it's right at temp. It's like 155, 157 degrees. And I'm stirring in it. And I swear this has never happened to me before. But a big bubble like came up from the surface of the kettle and it popped right in my face and pepper sprayed me. And so for 10 minutes, I'm like over the sink trying to wash out my eyes, trying to make it work. And finally, I can see out of one of my eyes. My right eye took it worse than my left, so I can see a little bit out of my left eye. And I get back and it's at temp, and I'm letting it hold temp, for the amount of time to get it all pasteurized so it's safe to go in the bottle. And the time's going on. I still can't see anything on my right eye. So I'm like, you know what? Let me start bottling. Because I got to get through this tonight because I'm on a hard deadline. Like LRA's in 48 hours, and I still got to bottle and label all of these things. So I start bottling, and I'm like 3 bottles in at that point, and my spigot on my bottler gets clogged. So I'm like, what the hell? So I try everything I can. Like I'm sticking wires up into it, trying to unclog it. I can't get it on. So at that point, I was like, I only have one solution. I have to take this entire kettle that just pepper sprayed me, and I have to dump it out. I have to wash the whole thing out. I have to take the spigot apart, and I have to clean it out. And I did that, and then I had to pour everything right back in, all while having one eye. So I had to go through the pasteurization process twice, all while having one eye, just to be able to bottle that night. And it was like 1 a.m. by the time I got out of the bottle, and I made it.
How's everyone take the company and just what you're providing when you go to these types of events?
It's been almost alarmingly positive, because I'm sure like you guys, like you expect that there's going to be people who don't like your product, for whatever reason, like whether they're, in your case, whether they're like staunch vegans or like they don't like smoked meats or whatever the case is, like. in my case, I expect people not to like my product. And I'm often shocked at how positive the reception is. And like LRA was a big one for me, more than just sales, just in my confidence and my ability to actually make this, something real and a viable business. Because when I went there, you've got some of the best chefs in Louisiana, some representing some of the best restaurants in Louisiana, at this show, and they're coming through, they're tasting the sauce. And when I've got the chef from August coming in and saying, or from Restaurant August coming in and buying like four packs of sauce because he likes it so much and he wants to bring it back and experiment with it, that tells me he believes in it. When I've got one of the best kind of friendships I kicked off at this LRA show was with Chef Erin Miller. So she's from Boston. She was there cooking in the Great American Seafood Cook-Off, and I don't think the guys from Gator would mind me telling this whole story, but I was talking to Brian from Gator. This was right as the conference was getting started. I was at his booth and we were kind of chatting, and Chef Erin came in just in a panic and she was looking for an ice chest. So she flew in from Boston with a bunch of seafood that was in a foam cooler, and it got damaged on the flight. So she's trying to find a cooler to replace it, and she's asking Brian, like, do you have something? I'll put it up there. It'll be on the stage. You'll get all this press. Like, it'll be in the pictures. And Brian's like, I don't really have any. Like, all I have is, like, my display stuff, and it's very minimal, and I need the ones that I have. I was like, well, look, I just unloaded mine. I've got a Gator cooler, like, you're welcome to use. So she uses it, and it turns out she ends up winning the competition. She's the, queen of American seafood. So she comes back to like bring my cooler back and starts tasting the sauces and like loves the sauce. Like her favorite is cherry bounce. But like listening to like a real chef, like real deal, like legitimate, like classically trained chef talk about my sauces in the way that she can, and it just does a lot for your confidence, man. Sure.
I bet. Where else, anywhere else this has taken you that, places you didn't expect to be?
I feel like at every turn there's something new. I didn't ever expect to have businesses approaching me wanting to, private label, make something for their private label or do something for their corporate gifts.
Is that something you're interested in?
Yeah.
And you getting some gifts, dude. So it's so interesting. I would highly recommend you do whatever you can for that, because it's one thing to be in the food industry and there's another to be in the gift industry. And if you can land something like that, it's amazing. And
I'm really finding now that that's a space that my sauces perform really well in. I'm in a handful of boutiques and gift shops right now. And in each of those, my sauces sell very well. And I think what it ultimately comes down to is most of these boutiques, they're stores that are largely for women. And there's usually a small food section. There's usually kind of some specialty food items. And I'll plug Three Stitches here in Thibodaux for a second. Kind of the same thing. They've got their embroidery stuff. They've got their gifts that are primarily women's gifts. But then they've got a small men's section that has, it has the turtle box, or it has your ice chest, and then it's got a small food section that has my stuff in it. Well, guess what? I've got no competition on those shelves. So when a wife walks in looking to buy a gift for her husband and doesn't want to spend the money on the turtle box, but she realizes for a smaller budget she can buy like one of these small soft coolers and a hot sauce gift set. Well, she's grabbing that all day long. And Three Stitches has been one of my best partners in the in the history of my business, just because they've constantly reordered and they've been so loyal and dedicated to me.
Yeah, that's a great partnership to have. Where's the name come from? Did you have a list of names and you had you sent them to the board members across the street, or you just knew?
No, So I am also very lucky to have a strong group of friends around me who all have this sort of like divergent experience. I have friends that literally represent every specialty and every profession, I think, on earth. And one of them happens to be a specialist in marketing and branding. And so I had a conversation with, his name's Todd. I had a conversation with Todd one day, and we were kind of brainstorming names. We were brainstorming, brand ideas. And when I tell you, it started out as like a 20-minute conversation with Todd, and Folse Alarm Fire Company was one of the names we threw out there that we felt really good about. And then we talked a little bit about what we wanted the brand to convey, and what we wanted it to represent, and we wanted what the look and feel needed to be. And I kid you not, within 48 hours, he sent me this full like digital branding package with like logo variations and potential label designs, which is actually where I drew a lot of inspiration off my current labels, was from those original designs. And so far Todd's advice has like really stuck. It's been solid.
That's awesome. I remember before Gator, when it was a thought, I remember talking on the phone with Mitch for, I don't know, 2 hours one day. I remember just walking around my backyard, and we were talking logos and like image design, brand stuff like that. But it's crazy, and look at him now. It's awesome. Let's see. What's the best one of these to put on a boudin burrito?
I think that's going to depend.
That's what everyone really wants to know.
So I would say if you are a big time traditionalist, you're going to want to go with the Pope. I think that'll be the consistent people pleaser that out the door every time. Like it's going to deliver every single time.
That's what you'd bring to a competition or some kind of. What if you could only enter one?
Look, that I would say.
Here's what we need. What if you had to compete against all the other hot sauce companies in the world, and it's being dripped on a raw oyster?
Oh, that's the Pope every single time. And that's particularly for oysters. I've got an album full of photos of people who have sent me pictures of them using the Pope on oysters. But that's not to discount the rest of the sauces. I think cherry bounce on a boudin burrito would be awesome.
Come on.
If you're into something a little bit different, I think the potential for that, like it could be a 10. Just thinking through that flavor profile, I think that could be a 10. Cherry bounce works really well with pork. So I think that could be a 10. The Pope, it's going to be a solid 8.5. Putting it on there.
What's your secret ingredient?
I'll tell you all my ingredients to all the sauces.
Man, all right. I'm going to teach you something on that. Here's how we handle the questions. People ask what kind of wood we use for our jerky. We say tree wood. They ask what kind of meat we use. We say cow meat. They ask us what temperature we smoke it at. We say pretty cold. And how long we smoke it for? All day. That's always the answer.
That reminds me so much of Podge. And part of the reason I don't mind sharing what's in there is like there's nothing hidden. And because people would ask Podge all the same questions, like, man, how do you make your jambalaya so good? How do you get that right balance of like, you get fluffy rice, but it's not mushy. Like, how do you do that? And he's just like, I just do it.
Yeah.
It's just, I do it the same way every time. Like, I don't know what to tell you. He's like, come watch and see if you can figure it out.
What's like a unexpected food that one of these might pair with? What's something wild that one of your customers sent?
Somebody, or actually one of the things that has come up shockingly pretty often has been cherry bounce on pizza. And thinking through it, I can understand how that would work, but that's a combination I would have never thought of.
Yeah, everybody likes like a sriracha on pizza.
Yeah.
Is it hard to get people to try it?
Sometimes, yeah. Because there's a lot of people out there who will just say like, "Oh, I'm not a big hot sauce person. I don't like hot sauce." I'm like, "Well, you've never had this hot sauce," and that's always my reply to them is, try it out and tell me what you think, and then let's be the judge. Because I've had countless people tell me like, I wasn't a hot sauce person before. I wasn't a hot sauce person before I tried your sauce, and now I'll put it on everything. Like I blended in my eggs in the morning, and I put it on. My beans. I season every cut of meat I have with it, and that's really what I'm looking for. Is like it's a more versatile condiment that people give it credit for.
Mm-hmm. What about businesses? What about potential vendors or like business partnerships? Mm-hmm. Is it tough to get them to try it?
It can be. Thankfully, I'm happy to say you guys were pretty easy. To partner with, and I think it's been a good partnership so far. At least for me, it has.
So we opened that new market in Gray. Okay, mm-hmm. You would not believe the amount of products that people want us to sell in the store, and if there's a hot sauce out there, you name it, a sample was dropped off. Quail eggs, mm-hmm. jellies, what you name it, it's been dropped off, and so it is a lot to sort through. Some of them are great, some of them are not so great. Some of them suck a lot. Some of them I can't believe they spent time making a label for it. But we kind of all do, it'll make its rounds. We'll leave it on the table, and somebody new will come in and try this, and they'll try it, like it, no, yeah, it's good. That's kind of we have a board system. And made the cut. Yeah. So everyone must have had good things to say about it. I don't know that we tried all of them at the time. In fact, I think this was the only one I tried before we actually partnered up with you. But Bo might have tried all of them.
And so Bo is who I was kind of going back and forth with on it. And his comment to me was when I sent the follow up, because of course I didn't think about the timing of everything, but it was right before Fireman's Fair last year when I dropped everything off. And just kind of went by the wayside, and then I followed up with Bo a little ways after. He's like, "Man, I'm so sorry. We were caught up in making burgers for the Fireman's Fair."
24,000.
Yeah. So his comment to me was, he was like, "Man," he's like, "we love the Pope. We need to get as much of that stuff as we can get in the store."
Great. So yeah, that'll go on a burrito.
Oh yeah,
for me tomorrow.
Yeah,
tomorrow.
You should try the cherry bounce and let me know what you think.
I'm gonna try them all. My wife's gonna be excited about this. Yeah. We do a lot of fish, a lot of shrimp. Yeah. Love tacos. I'll bust that on some pulled pork, on a little pulled pork slider or something. Yep. So talk a little bit about the business startup and that whole thing, and I don't know, some problems, struggles, and stuff like that.
My struggle from day one, and I think this is a problem that most startup businesses want to have, has been being able to meet demand. And it sounds like, a kind of a sad thing to say, or it sounds like I'm kind of complaining about a good thing, but in reality, in business, like you want to meet all of your customers' demands regardless of what they are, and you want to make them happy every single time. And even being able to say, look, I don't have any of that sauce right now. It's going to be another week before I can make any more. That's the potential of losing a customer and losing them for life. So there's real consequences to that. And that has been, or most of the struggles of the business have come around that, because up until pretty recently, I was making batches of, I think my biggest batch I made at home was, I think it was 75 bottles, in my home kitchen. Now I can make about 2,000 bottles in a weekend. So my capacity has increased dramatically. But even still, I'm making 2,000 bottles in a weekend, and sometimes depending on what they are and what orders I have out there, they're gone in, 2.5 weeks. Mm-hmm. So I'm having to make constantly, and it's a strain. So meeting the demand has been difficult, but more specifically, meeting the demand while also dealing with cash flow challenges in a small business has been tough. Because last April I won the small business pitch competition, the Bayou Region Small Business Pitch Competition, and I won $10,000, which is great, and I'm eternally grateful for that because I was able to buy some equipment and get into my own space. So now I can make 2,000 bottles on a weekend. The problem is every batch that I'm making and have continued to make, every batch has been bigger than the previous batch. So I'm tying up so much cash in future batches that I'm inevitably cash short every single time it comes to produce again. And I'm having to dip into my own, personal cash reserves to float it, which is fine. I mean, that's part of what, it's the hustle. That's part of what I signed up for. But it's good to know, it's reassuring to know that I have the demand for the product, that if I were to partner with someone else to help with the production capacity issues, it's good to know that there's some pent up demand out there that if I committed to, a large order or something like that, that I'd be able to move those fairly quickly. But at the same time, like, even that is a big jump. I've considered going the co-packer route and have talked to some folks about it. None I can really mention here right now, but most of those have a minimum order quantity of 10,000 bottles, and that's 10,000 bottles of a single sauce. So trying to tie up the amount of cash it would take to make 40,000 bottles of hot sauce on the potential for sales is, it's a big risk. So I'd love to do it tomorrow, but at the same time, it's like I have to make sure that I'm good with it, that I really believe in the demand that's out there. I have to make sure my wife's good with it because it's going to obviously that's something we're going to have to finance personally unless we wait a lot longer to do it. But waiting a lot longer to do it means that we're potentially losing out on customers with every passing day or week or month.
Interested in any investors or anything like that?
I would entertain it for the right investor.
Yeah.
I've got to make sure that it's one of two things. It's either going to be an investor who is truly silent, that trusts me into making the decisions for the business to make it work, or it's an investor that can add value within the industry. So someone who has distribution ties, someone who has production ties, someone who can help me with navigating the industry would be helpful. But I'm going to be very, very picky about considering investors.
Good to have out there. Someone might hear it and say, I'm game for that.
Yeah.
How do you deal? You're talking about like scaling up and right now you're doing a bigger batch every single time. How do you find the math checks out on scaling up? Does it? Or do you write it all down how it needs to be, and then you make it and you taste it and you say, that's off. I know that's off.
So I have what's the best way to put this? The math mostly checks out. When I just go kind of one for one with the bigger batches, it gets it pretty close for me. So then it becomes in effect me tasting versus previous batches.
And and that's what you have to get good at.
And that's a big reason, like when it comes to investor stuff or even the co-packing thing, like I'm not 100% confident just like turning this thing over because they're not going to be testing every batch the way that I am versus versus previous batches. And I know that like when I blend a bottle of sauce, if I blend it right away, it's going to taste different on that first day that I blend than on the second and the third day. It's also going to taste different, like a little different after pasteurization. And I know what it tastes like at every one of those phases. So I can kind of monitor and measure how it's supposed to taste just from memory and just from reflex. And I wish there was a better way for me to quantify it, but there's not. At this point, like it's just on that previous taste because I have it locked into memory.
It's a little bit of art in there. Same thing with everything we cook. It's hard to trust a new guy to come in and cook, but like right now we have a cousin of ours. he's learning. He's learning all of it. He's making the boudin himself. He's seasoning it. And we kind of just started in baby steps to where we're kind of back there, doing it. They're watching.
Mm-hmm.
Then they're doing it, and we're watching. And then, we taste every batch, and might go back there, add a little more salt or something, because the math doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't check out. It's just too many variables. So we'll go taste, and sometimes it just, hey, stir it for 5 more minutes,
Mm-hmm.
and that's it. Sometimes it's all wrong, and then you got to figure out a way to. They have to understand what you're thinking over these batches after batch after batch, and then eventually they start getting it. But that's a lot different than sending a spreadsheet to a company and say, hey, make this.
Right.
Now make 10x.
Yeah, and you triggered a different thought for me, because this is a small batch product. Like even if I get to the point where it's like a 10,000 bottle batch, relative to the rest of the industry, that's still small batch. Mm-hmm. That conceivably can be done from one form in one picking of peppers, but there's natural variability that happens when you're doing it that way. So things are going to be a little bit different from one batch of peppers to the next. So for me, there's some things that I can control within that variability. There's other things I can't. Some batches of peppers are just hotter than the others. Just like for you, like some, if you get pork or beef from a different supplier one time versus another, it may be a little fattier or a little leaner, and all of that's going to impact your final product. It's the same for me with pepper supply. And sometimes the peppers will be a little more fruity and a little less hot. Sometimes it'll be a little more hot and a little less fruity. And just, again, like having the memory to be able to get it just right is a little bit of an art.
I thought of a question while you were saying you're talking about picking peppers. Mm-hmm. How many peppers are in a peck?
I don't know. Call Peter Piper.
I promise I hadn't been thinking about that all day. I swear. So right now, consistency is probably not a huge problem, right? But I guess it can be.
Yeah. And actually, I'm okay with a little bit of variability in the sauces, as long as if they're checking all the right boxes for me. If the main flavor profile, kind of that core flavor profile, is where I want it and need it to be, then I'm okay with it if it is a little hotter or if it is a little fruitier, because I know that it's still going to check most of the boxes for most of the people. And again, that's sort of the fun of having a small batch product, is that there is going to be a little bit of change. That's why I love small batch bourbon, is because it's a little bit different every bottle.
Now, well, what are you passionate about? The sauce or the peppers?
I am passionate about the sauce.
It's more of a sauce thing than a pepper thing. Mm-hmm. If you were to venture out into other products, have you thought about that, or is it sauce? I'm thinking about like salsas and chow-chows and
I've got a whole line of ideas in my head. There's some that I've tried. There's some that I haven't tried on a very small batch, like just for me and my friends and family, because I can't legally sell them. But things like candied jalapenos, like I made for a while. I made this sweet chili sauce that was incredible. I don't have the right equipment to be able to pasteurize those and make those food safe in my current state. But there's I'd love to do a chow. I'd love to do a salsa. I'd love to do pre-made gravy mixes and gumbos and whatnot. Like for me, the business is way more about the stories than it really is even about the sauce. Like I love the sauce. Like I love the process of making the sauce and blending a sauce and creating a new sauce. I love that part. But the fact that I also get to use those things as vehicles to tell stories about people I care about, or places I care about, or things that I care about, or just even random throwaway memories I have, like the cherry bounce being the alcohol that I think of when I think of my grandma, because it was the only alcohol she drank was homemade cherry bounce.
Come on, that's where it came from?
That's where the name came from.
That's awesome.
So every one of these things is tied to some sort of memory or some sort of some sort of legacy of someone.
What about any future plans coming up soon? Any kind of changes?
Well, I do think that the co-packing thing is probably something that would be the next big thing, and that could happen relatively soon. Mm-hmm. I've pretty much maxed out what my current production is in my space and just my ability with the number of hours in the day. I am, this is still not a full-time job for me. And I don't know that it'll ever really be a full-time job, nor do I want it to be. I think if it became my only source of income, it would probably turn into more of a job and less of a kind of a passion project. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean I don't want to continue to grow it and make it successful. I want, I want to blow the doors off this thing with the business. But we're a ways away from doing that. I think co-packing is probably the next big step. If I can do that, and that puts me on a trajectory to do more sales. And I hate saying that word because it sounds just sort of greasy. But if I could do more sales or at least tell more stories, I think the stories and the quality of the sauce sells it. Mm-hmm. And everyone who tastes it, or almost everyone, loves it. And if I can continue with that and have someone else produce it for me and maintain that level of quality, then I'll be in good shape.
Yeah, man, just giving, like you said, you send in some bottles and stuff to some influencers. Mm-hmm. That goes such a long way. Not the influencer thing, but Joe Blow down the street, or you go to someone's camp and you leave a bottle. Like, man, that stuff will come back so fast at your face. Yep. And I think people, rightfully so, but when they start a business, you have to make ends meet, and you have to be stingy. Like, every bottle you give away came off of a number somewhere, and I think the goal is to get to where at least you're breaking even, but get it into everyone you can. Yep. Like, put it in every in every mouth you can find.
I am so happy you're bringing this up, because this is something my wife and I, like, we don't ever fight about this, but she's made comments to me more often than I care to admit, because I am very liberal with how much sauce I give away. Mm-hmm. And how many times I will eat the cost, not only on the bottles of sauce, but on the shipping label and on everything else to get it to the right person, just, at a shot in the dark. Mm-hmm. And, how many cases of sauces I've given to my dad to take to the camp or to give to his buddies, or, to do whatever. Because I believe in that same thing. It's like, it only takes one bottle that gets to the right guy who gets to the right guy. Yeah. And all of a sudden it completely changes the business. So, my my actual margins are probably twice as good as what I'm actually seeing. Yeah. Because I'm giving away so much sauce.
I think that's it. And I don't think that should ever stop.
No, I agree.
Look at it as a reward down the road if you get to do it, and keep doing it.
Yeah. And I had a buddy of mine, it's kind of funny, a buddy of mine from high school. We were on the phone the other day, and he said, he's talking to people around town, and somehow or another my name comes up, and I'm slowly but surely come to be known as the hot sauce guy. And I think part of it is just because I've had to give so much away, and I've been working for the last, year for sure, like really promoting it and trying to get it out there and trying to have people try it. And it's been awesome, just being a whole part of that process. And to think that, like, this really just kind of started from an experiment is kind of wild. Yeah,
it's organic. It's not salesy.
Yeah.
And the part back to what we were talking about, getting dropped off all these products to try, and people want to sell. Like, they really do. And not that you don't either. You hope that too. But I understand where you're coming from, and it is also, half about just spreading the story and getting the exposure. Yep. Not so much will this dollar come back to me. Right. I think if that's all people think about, I don't know if they're gonna run their wheels out.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's I can talk for hours about this, but just like getting to be here and recording this podcast with you today and share stories about my grandpa and like what he meant to me. Like that's the reward for me. Like I love, trust me, like I would love it if I could become independently wealthy off of hot sauce, but the real reward is being able to get his legacy to continue to live on. Cause he meant so much to me. And being able to, you know, represent him and carry on his legacy this way, it means the world to me. The fact that my 3-year-old daughter, who never met him, can look at a bottle of hot sauce and say, that's Pawpaw Potch. And I like Pawpaw Potch when I eat hamburgers. Like that makes me tear up.
Yeah.
Because like, it makes me know that like I've done a good job of making sure that she knows who my influences are, because that's just going to continue on that legacy for generations, hopefully.
I mean, you got a little tour of this place, and I'm sure you've seen it's barely holding on, and it's rough, man. It's a rough thing to look at, but I like for people to look at it, you know, because, you know, my grandpa grew up across the street, and you know, I deal with all the same emotions that you know kick-started you with that relationship, but there's something to be said about just a gnarly old building.
Yep.
Like, yes, we could fancy this place up. That would do a disservice to what we do and how we do things. And I think why we're, you know, partially why we're successful. But you have to find a way to show a new hire, like, here's who we are. Like, I need you to understand. I know you had our jerky and you eat our burger at the fair every year, and your dad gets our sausage. You don't understand who we are. I'm going to show you. Like, and that's a long process. It could take, you know, they could be on their 3rd or 4th year before they go, oh, they're like, okay, I'm bought in. I get it, you know, and it's a long, slow process. It's not all, and you know, you can't let everyone into all the stories, you know, on day one, but you want to. Yeah. So, you know, partially that's kind of what this is doing. People can kind of go study up on their own and hear some of these old stories about Pawpaw, and we have a huge family, and everyone has always heard some of the stories, but you always, you know, some of the parts are left unknown, and hopefully that's kind of what this is doing. One, for us. 2, for our kids, our grandkids, our great grandkids, and then our customers. Like, you take for granted how special or how cool, I guess, some of the little stupid things you share. You know, you share this one thing, and then someone from California struck up a memory of something that happened 20 years ago, and now they're thinking about the time they passed through Thibodeau with their uncle. You know, like, because I posted a picture of a door, like, you know, like, but it's real. It really is real. Yeah,
I mean, this place feels historic to me, and I'm so happy I got the chance to walk through with you, because I know to a lot of people, like you said, like they'd walk in and like, this is nothing about this place is impressive, but the comment that I made as we were walking through, and I can't remember if it was like the processing room or the cooler or whatever, but just to see the literal wear between, like in that little walkway right there, you know, me thinking about like all the steps that have been taken, like all of the work that has been done between those 2 rooms, and that to the point that you can literally see it in the concrete floor. Those kinds of places astounded me. You know, and I want for every business like this to be able to succeed and tell its story. I want to build a business like this, truthfully. You know, I have really sort of, you know, fantasized a little bit about the bourgeois meat market story. And I don't know if I've told you or Bo or anybody this before, but I've got such admiration for what you guys have done as a family, keeping this thing open and going for as long as you have, that I really believe like this is one of like Louisiana's historic places. I had a group of buddies come from all over the country, November of 23, I had guys in from Ohio and Texas and Portland, Oregon, and all over the country, literally, and from all different walks of life. And they had 2.5 days in the Bayou region, and one of our stops was Bourgeois, because I knew like they were not leaving here without coming.
That's awesome.
Without coming into this meat market that is historic, that's been open for over 100 years, that has all of this history behind it. And I'm going to tell you, like, every one of those guys, like, walking into this place, like into this building, where you feel the history on the walls and you just want to know like all of the stories that these walls could tell, like that meant the world to them. And I want to share that with you, because like that's the kind of memories you're making for other people.
It's awesome, man. I think I got some hot sauce in both my eyes. That's really great. I appreciate that. And I do forget that. We all do. But you forget it, and then you forget to teach it, and then you don't know how to word it. So this will be a good history lesson on our next training day.
Good.
but seriously, like, to let a new hire watch something like that and say, this is what you're signing up for when you get on that counter. It's big.
Yep. This represents more than just you, or more than just a local meat market. Like this is 100+ years of history that you're representing.
Awesome, man. Anything else?
No, I think I'm good.
Folse Alarm Fire Company.com.
Yep.
Type thing.
FolseAlarm.com.
FolseAlarm.com. Can get all of everything you have. You got apparel, other stuff too. You ship straight to your door and everything.
Yep.
We're selling it at the meat market in Gray in the little retail section. We've got all 4 of the sauces. Do we have the seasoning as well?
Not the seasoning yet.
Okay.
Got all 4 sauces.
Got all 4 sauces. Slap that on a boudin burrito. Want some oysters. Facebook, Instagram, you're reachable.
Follow me on all social media. That's where I post any updates. If I do any limited run batches. When we're recording this, I just released a chipotle sauce for pre-order. But by the time it actually releases to the masses, I don't know if I'll still have any left. But if you're hearing this, go check if you want to order a chipotle sauce.
Cool. Thanks, Bart. Appreciate it.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Incredible. All right, that's it for this episode of the Miracles of Meat podcast. We ask that you share it with at least one person in your life that you think needs to hear it. If you got a little something from it, you got some little goose pimples, or it just gave you some feel goods, send it to someone else. Let them feel that too. And if you loved it, please leave us a 5-star review. That'll really help out. And if you only loved it like 4 stars worth, please do not leave a review. Same thing with the 1 through 3. Not interested in any of those, only 5 stars. If you have any personal questions or comments about the episode, shoot them over to Bourgeois Meat Market on Facebook or Instagram, and we'll reach back out. And if you have any ideas for any cool future guests, please shoot those over too. We're always interested in hearing who else is out there and what kind of cool stories we might be able to bring into this place. See you next time. Thanks for listening.